Let's get the slides up. So I used to be a teacher. And it was funny, no matter whether it was history class or English class or science class or Bible class. What else did I teach? I taught a few other things too. Whatever class it was in, every time I said, there's going to be a test, I always got the same question. What's it over? Yeah. What's it over? What's on the test? Yeah. What's it over? So that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. And I think you'll end up agreeing with me. The short answer is it's going to be over Lucifer's last three claims. Now, the devil doesn't like to do anything obvious, above board, and open. Maybe you've noticed that. That's why he showed up looking like a snake. So it would be pretty remarkable if you saw a billboard along the highway that, was listing these last three claims as something that, was an issue for the day. But there's a lot of evidence pointing that way, and so we're going to try and do a little review of some things that we've already touched on, just kind of lay the groundwork, and then we'll move on to some new stuff. So these two signs represent two different kinds of laws. I guess I should have read those. Number 7. The claim, God's law is arbitrary. God's law makes forgiveness impossible. And then God is lying. Okay. So we have two different kinds of laws here. The one on the left is an arbitrary law. Now, in day-to-day circumstances, that's not bad. Almost every law you can think of is an arbitrary law. It is what it is because somebody thought that was, what it ought to be. Why do you pay whatever percentage of income tax you pay down here? Why do you pay whatever percent of sales tax? Do you have to have a dog license? On your dog's collar? If so, it's because somebody thought it was a good idea and it made a law out of it, right? This is the kind of law that's made by Congress or Parliament or City Hall. It's easy to change. Whoever made that law just needs to say something new. It says 40, maybe it should be 30. Maybe it should be 60. Whoever made the law in the first place just changes it. Piece of cake. Laws like that are not automatic. Those laws always require someone to enforce it. If there's no police officer, you're not going to get a ticket. Maybe you deserve one, but he's not there. He's not going to give you one. Laws like that are easy to forgive. Police officer might just give you a warning. Maybe it goes to court, and for whatever reason, the judge just throws it out. This kind of law is different. It's not arbitrary. It's impossible to change. Congress and Parliament and City Hall, they can't change that law. They didn't make it in the first place. They sure can't change it. It just is. And that's where I got stuck with my own personal study and trying to understand things. If God could create mountains and oceans and planets and galaxies by just speaking them into existence, Was I really brave enough to say that he didn't make his law that way? What do I know, right? Was I brave enough to say that God couldn't change his law? Now, it was a little complicated because he was saying that. He was saying that, the law is impossible to change. But what did that really mean? And I wondered. So I puzzled over that question from 1988 till 2014. Now, for those of you who are quick on the math, that's 26 years. That's longer than some of you have been alive. And I just puzzled that question round and round in my head, trying to figure that one out. Finally, I decided to sit down and just try to write out what I knew for certain, what I could, I was confident I could document, I could prove, and then I could find out. That's how I straighten out my own thing. You just start writing, and then you find out where the holes are, that type of thing, right? So that's what I set out to do in about 2014. Well, that project ended up taking a year and ended up with a 400-page manuscript. I learned a lot because, writing forces you to look at things in ways that you hadn't before. I realized along the way that every aspect of God's government, not to mention the plan of salvation, which is kind of a subset of his government, it's all based on his law. The law is the absolute foundation of everything. And you don't take a skyscraper and just start messing around with the foundation. It's like, that's a certifiably very bad idea, okay? You don't want to mess with the foundation. So I was in awe of this situation, but I didn't know how to make it all fit in my own mind, right? But as I worked on that manuscript, all the issues that were involved with it, the only workable solution I could find was that God did not make his law. It just is. Which still seemed like a pretty nervy thing for me to say. I mean, who am I to be pronouncing, this is the truth, right? So in 2015, I just shelved the manuscript, made no effort to publish it, never have, probably never will. And coincidentally, about a month or so after I just put the thing on the shelf, the Ellen G. White estate, on the anniversary of Ellen White's death, 100 years, they released what's known as the Letters and Manuscripts file, okay? This is thousands of new pages. This is stuff that I enjoy reading, right? So this is thousands of new pages for me to read. And so that distracted me, and I started reading like mad and just having a great time and learning all sorts of new things and finding stuff. And that's fun. I enjoy that, right? I wasn't working on my manuscript anymore, but it was still pretty fresh in my mind. So as I went through, I was noticing things that I hadn't seen before that kind of hinted, the direction I was going. So I made note of those. Here's a couple of those. The Lord is ready to open new lines of thought in regard to the great plan of redemption. Well, what's that mean? New lines of thought in regard to the plan of redemption. It's not real clear. No. Something new. Up to this time, the Bible truths connected with the great plan of redemption are but feebly understood. The truth will be continually unfolding, expanding, and developing, for it is divine, like its author. Wow, feebly understood. The great plan of redemption is not half comprehended. If we could only understand the plan of salvation, we would be the happiest people upon the face of the earth. That one caught my eye. I like happy, Face it, we're all addicted to dopamine, right? we like happy. if we could just understand the plan, it's not half comprehended. That means we've got at least 51% to play around and try and figure out. Wow, what an opportunity to be happy. But it didn't answer my question. You may have seen something in regard to the righteousness of Christ, but there is truth yet to be seen clearly. You will see the law of God and interpret it to the people in an entirely different light from what you have done in the past. For the law of God will be seen by you as revealing a God of mercy and righteousness. The atonement made by the stupendous sacrifice of Jesus Christ will be seen by you in an altogether different light. Well, that sounds kind of major. Altogether, that's nothing. That's not nothing. Let's put it that way. And so we can start to see some sort of, a bit of a direct connection there, right? Because if you look at the law of God in an altogether different light, well, the atonement is how to take care of the problem that somebody broke the law. So if you're seeing the law in a different light, you're probably going to see the atonement in a different light. Because, if the law is not what you thought it was, then atonement is probably not what you thought it was. Does that make sense? You follow what I'm saying there? Okay. But all of that did not say that God didn't make his law. It doesn't say that God's law just is. So I kept reading, kept studying and whatnot, and I mulled that question over for another 8 years, from 2015 to 2023. And then in March of 2023, so not quite 2 years ago, I guess, I decided, I'm going to pull that manuscript back out and take a look at it. Just, kind of refresh it in my brain, see if there was anything that I'd learned in the 8 years in between that, would fill any holes and gaps and things like that. So just something to do, right? So I did. I usually do that kind of study first thing in the morning. I get up pretty early generally just because I don't sleep very long. And the second morning I was looking at that manuscript, I was sitting there at my little laptop, this little laptop here, just working away, and something, I don't remember what it was, came up into my mind, and I said, I'm going to Google whatever that thing was, right? And so I Googled something. I don't know what it was. And, Google pops up, 8 or 10 things, and they got little snippets of quotes and, whatnot from the page and whatnot. And I was looking at that, and there was one, I could see just enough words, and I saw where it was coming from. I was pretty certain it was Ellen White. Didn't have her name on it, but I was pretty certain that's what it was. But there was just enough of a phrase there that I said, I've never seen that before. I don't remember what it said, but I've never seen that before. That sounds different. Now, here's probably a character weakness on my part. I didn't want to click on the link because it was going to take me to a website that I don't like. Okay? It's this website that just typically is a bunch of Adventists, stupid arguments. So I said, I don't go there. I'm not going to give them any traffic. Forget it. But I had a few words, so I do my own searching off of my computer, right? And so I typed in those words, hit enter, and it said, nothing found. Well, that's odd. So I took a little different set of words and typed it in, nothing found. That's really odd. That's really odd. Finally, after messing around like that for about 3 or 4 minutes, I broke down and clicked on the link. I felt bad doing it, but I did. I wanted to see the statement. So I clicked on the link, and sure enough, it took me to this website, and there was this Ellen White quote, and I read it, and it's like I about lost my dentures, which is quite an accomplishment because I don't have any. But it just stunning. It was the most mind-blowing thing I'd ever run into. And now I could see the whole thing, so I picked another set of words or something, and I typed it in, and it wasn't there. I said, well, this is crazy. What's going on with this? So I went down and I looked at the source, the reference for it, okay? And it was manuscript 79, 1896. I couldn't get it to come up. So I just, on the computer, you can go scrolling down through manuscript 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, So I'm just heading down to 79. 1896, the last manuscript was 78. There was no manuscript 79. Oh, man. Now I'm getting mad. Okay? It is not right to be making up Ellen White stuff to win some stupid argument. Okay? You don't do that. Okay? And so I was mad. I was righteously indignant. And you can make comments on this website, and I was going to lay into this guy. I mean, somebody's getting disfellowshipped here. Okay? This is just wrong. You do not be making up the prophet, And I was just ready to just flame the guy. And then just this, maybe it was a still small voice. I won't try to take too much credit. But I thought, I should check the online website. So I never used the online. I just liked it on my machine. But I went to the online thing, and I typed in some words. Manuscript 79, 1896, popped right up. Well, I had a little discussion with the boys back in the White Estate, and they said, yeah, that one file got left off of the one that we distributed out for people that want to work off of their machine. They left that one manuscript off. It was an accident, no conspiracy. It just got left off. I could have had it 8 years earlier. Because one manuscript, actually 2 sentences, and Ellen White did what I spent 400 pages trying to do. Now, I'm glad for the time and the effort and the study and the 400 pages. I ironed out a lot of little wrinkles, okay? Might have burnt the shirt with the iron, but anyhow, I ironed out a lot of wrinkles. Now, you've already seen the statement, because we looked at it earlier. But with that context, maybe you can appreciate it a little bit more. Right and wrong are not based upon God's moral government. God's moral government is based upon a distinction between right and wrong. Let's just stop right there for now. If A is based on B, which came first? B, yeah. If A is based on B, B was already there. The erroneous view which many have of this subject causes them to rebel against God's law of government as arbitrary. That's Lucifer's argument. It's arbitrary. We get this backwards, and it looks arbitrary. Now, it may seem like a chicken or the egg kind of a stupid question. Is it this on that or that on this? But here's what it boils down to. If right and wrong is based on God's government, then right and wrong could be something different than it is today. God's government could have defined 60 miles an hour instead of 40 miles an hour. Does that make sense? If right and wrong is based on God's government, then anything he wanted could have been right. He could have made murder a righteous thing. An awful lot of people have come up against God's law and said, I'd like to change this one here. And if you think that it is done that way, just because that's what God wanted it to be, then you get mad at God because he did something stupid, right? Why didn't he make it the way I want it? And so that's what it says here. The erroneous view which many have of this subject causes them to rebel against God's law of government as arbitrary. It is what it is because that's what you did. That's just what you said it was going to be, God. I don't like what you said. You could have said something a little more reasonable. But it's not that way. And we've seen this next statement too. The law of God is the foundation of his government and is exactly what is needed to preserve life and righteousness. It's just that the law of God, the foundation of his government, is built on the distinction between right and wrong. And because right and wrong are unavoidably what they are, right preserves life, wrong destroys life. You can't change that. Okay. So God's moral law isn't what it is just because he said that's what it was going to be. By definition, God's moral law is not arbitrary. Does that make sense? I know it's just kind of, we're dealing with words here, right? But it makes a difference because if the law isn't arbitrary, forgiveness can't be arbitrary. Right? Remember the speed limit? Arbitrary law, easy to forgive. Very easy to forgive. Just give them a warning ticket. The right angle corner law, not so easy to forgive. You come into that corner too fast, doesn't matter if the cop says, I'm just giving you a warning, you still blew your car apart, going off in the ditch. So it actually makes sense. And this is a part of the test. So let's keep going. Now, God is trying to get us ready for the test, right? So I call that therapy right here now. Listen to this one. This is really fascinating. The atonement of Christ is not a mere skillful way to have our sins pardoned. It is a divine remedy for the cure of transgression and the restoration of spiritual health. It is the heaven-ordained means by which the righteousness of Christ may be not only upon us, but in our hearts and characters. Now, we've used this kind of terminology before. There's judicial forgiveness, and then there's healing. This is healing. The atonement of Christ, it's not just a lawyer trick, right? If you're charged with some crime, you pay enough for a lawyer, you can probably find a way to get off because, lawyers are, not all lawyers, but lawyers can be dirty. Let's put it that way, okay? There's a lot of shenanigans that go on, and if you pay enough money, you just might be able to pull it off your way. That's not what this is. This is a cure. It's a remedy. It's the restoration of health. It's, as in the natural, so in the spiritual. It's like the way a tree would grow, or a corn plant, or tomato plant, or something, whatever, okay? This is new. This is twisting my brain around, because that's not the way I grew up thinking of any of this. Said my guide, there is much light yet to shine forth from the law of God and the gospel of righteousness. This message, understood in its true character and proclaimed in the Spirit, will grow to large importance, such as you scarcely dream of, and will lighten the earth with its glory. His law will be looked upon as the rule of his government. Okay, well, I think we already look at it as the rule of his government, but there's something we're missing here. Much light yet to shine forth. And it's talking about the law and the gospel. Those are pretty basic things. We're not talking about the 2,300 days or, something else. This is the law and the gospel. This is real basic stuff. That's what the test is going to be over. We have only glimmering light in regard to the exceeding breadth of the law of God. What does glimmering mean? It's kind of faint, barely there, right? Down this neck of the woods, you guys got glowworms, right? You've seen glowworms in the summer? Then you got fireflies. Don't have any of that stuff up where I live right now. But glowworms, right? Just ugly-looking little worms that crawl around, but they got this little bright spot on them, right? But it's not that bright. It's kind of glimmering. You can kind of see it sometimes. It's almost like one of those things where you look at it and it disappears, but if you look off to the side, you can say, it's over there. Yeah. We have only glimmering light in regard to the exceeding breadth of the law of God. Many who claim to be teachers of the truth have no conception of what they're handling when they are presenting the law to the people, because they have not studied it. They've not put their mental powers to the task of understanding its significance. I get the impression that there's something there we need to catch on to. A new purpose must possess the mind, for there is a special work to be done in all our churches. That includes Ardmore. Christ has revealed his law in these last days, and this most sacred truth is constantly unfolding and impressing the intellect of the youth and the aged. There's something going on here about the law. It's kind of interesting because once upon a time in our history, it was actually said that we had preached the law, the law, the law until we were as dry as the hills of Gilboa. Remember that statement? You'd think maybe we understood the law. Or maybe we didn't. And maybe that's why it ended up dry. Then there's this statement. We've already seen this one. I don't know. Maybe I haven't used it here. Help me out. Tell me if you've seen this one before. You may have seen something. I just read it a few minutes ago. You may have seen something in regard to the righteousness of Christ, but there's truth yet to be seen clearly. You will see the law of God and interpret it to the people in an entirely different light from what you have done in the past. For the law of God will be seen by you as revealing a God of mercy and righteousness. The atonement made by the stupendous sacrifice of Jesus Christ will be seen by you in an altogether different light. So again, if you see the law in a different light, the atonement is the way that God's dealing with the broken law, right? I mean, you wouldn't have an atonement if no one had broken the law. And so if the law is not what I thought it was, and I have a new understanding of the law, then I probably ought to be, looking at the atonement and saying, I'm not sure that was going to work the way I thought it was either. Because it has to work in a way that addresses the reality of that law. Okay? Okay. So there's some stuff to be working on here. This is what the test is over. We've got to figure this stuff out. Therapy, think of it as test preparation, right? For what here? For what? Well, through the merits of Christ, man is to show by his obedience that he could be trusted in heaven, that he would not rebel. This is the most dirt, simple, obvious thing to me in like the whole world, right? Lucifer and his crowd of angels, they rebel and get kicked out. Okay? Why in the world would I think that God's going to take someone back in that has the same issue? That just doesn't pass the common sense test for me. And so, why is there a test? Well, they want to know if we're worth having, basically. It makes sense. Are we safe to save? I kind of like that way of saying the idea, right? The laws of God that man is required to obey here in this life are the exact rules he must obey in heaven to be safe, subject to the kingdom of God. Well, it's interesting. It's like, how would they know that we could be safe up there? Well, if we keep the same rules down here. It seems kind of straightforward to me. It's fairly daunting, right? I'm not saying it's simple or easy, but the concept makes a lot of sense. or God's people in general, are supposed to be the evidence to prove Satan wrong, something's definitely needed to get us ready for that starring role, right? Okay? As Ellen White put it, we've got some preparing to do, right? In the character of God's people, a living testimony will be born that will contradict the fallacy of Satan, who has declared that the law of Jehovah is arbitrary. That's accusation number 7. And holds its subjects under a cruel bondage. It's in the character of God's people that the evidence is produced that proves him wrong. That's one reason I know that number 7 is still on the table. Does that make sense? You tracking with me? You don't go around producing evidence for things when they've already been proven wrong. That's just, that's kind of crazy. And if that's what we're supposed to do, if we're supposed to be that evidence, we've got some working to do. Okay, kind of hurry on here. So, of the more than 400 times Ellen White uses the phrase "to prepare a people," now that's her own phrase. She adapted it from a Bible verse, but in I forget which gospel it was. It's put in the past tense. It's a people prepared. But she took that idea and she turns it around and she says, "This is our work, to prepare a people." Okay? She says that more than 400 times. Well over half of them include the words "to stand." As in, here's an example: to prepare a people to stand in the trying crisis before us. That's the test we're getting ready for. Common to all these variations, though, is the idea of the end of times. That's what the preparation of a people is all about. There is a great test, a final test, a time of test, the test of Jacob's trouble coming. It may be said to be in the day of judgment or the day of the Lord or the day of Christ's return. Whatever the phrasing, the point is we've got something to get ready for. So what's on the test? How's this all work? To prepare a people, right? We've seen this statement before, but now we've got a little more context. We can kind of build on it a bit more. Without a correct knowledge of God, the human family would be divested of all divine strength. With false attributes kept before the mind as belonging to God, the human family would be the dupes of satanic lies, the subjects of satanic agents, and he could practice upon their credulity with success. So what's going to be on the test? A correct knowledge of God. Without it, we're toast. Okay? Let's keep going. We've already looked at that one. I'm going to skip over it for the sake of time. God's people are to cooperate with him and no longer retard the final completion of his eternal plan. Well, that sounds like a great idea. What do you say? Maybe we should cooperate. Maybe we should stop retarding the final completion of his eternal plan. So here's a little thought a friend used. It's just a phrase. I really like it. He said, "It is suffering that makes time expensive." Do you know how many people get murdered every year? How many little kids get abused every year? How many houses burn down every year? How many little kids die of pneumonia or malaria or, I don't know. God does. Suffering makes time expensive. God's people are to cooperate with him. No longer retard the final plan. It seems like a great idea. If you've ever thought of doing something great to win the Nobel Peace Prize, how about ending all human suffering? I think you should at least get a nomination for that, The Nobel Committee might not be smart enough to figure out what's going on, but at least you should get nominated. We need to know the plan of the battle that we may work in harmony with Christ. That's getting ready for the test. We need to know the plan of the battle. Okay, let's keep going here. Some people, probably nobody here, but some people are probably thinking right now that there's going to be some sort of a super duper advanced spiritual warfare secret weapon thing come. This is the answer, is all this great stuff, right? There's some magic something, and no, it's not, okay? Preparing a people is very largely, and it certainly starts with little things. The Lord will honor those who in this life have been faithful in the little things. They will not be found wanting when the greater tests come to them. Little things. Don't neglect the little things. The little things help to constitute the discipline of life. They are the means for the training of the soul, for the development of character, for the courts above. So don't skip over on the little things, okay? I'm not going to give you a checklist of all the little things that I think you need to do. And I would like to suggest that though there are lots of other people and lots of other organizations and lots of, I don't know, whatever else, websites and podcasts and who knows what, that are just more than happy to hand you a checklist of all the little things you need to do, got a key piece of advice for you. Ignore them. just ignore them. Ask God. Ask God, I will give you two sort of examples of topics where little things, we have some indication little things play an important role. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'm not going to tell you, whatever, but you'll get the picture. The reason why many of us will fail in the time of trouble is because of laxity and temperance and indulgence of appetite. Now, what does that mean? You figure it out. I'm not going to tell you. I don't believe that God pushes things to ridiculous lengths, right? How many Cheerios can I eat before it's overeating? Is 1,600 Cheerios okay? But 1,601, that's gluttony? I don't think it works that way. I'm not going to give you any lists. But you know the difference, or God can tell you the difference in temperance and indulgence of appetite. Those are good things to work on. Those are little things. Just take care of them. John Wesley wrote a sermon once, or preached a sermon, I suppose, but somebody wrote it down. Had a classy line on it. He said, "These are such little things." He was talking about ribbons in their hats, and he was talking about clothes and such, I think. But he says, "These are such little things. Why should we make an issue out of little things?" And he said, "Absolutely right. They are such little things. Just get rid of them." Because they're so little. Why worry about them at all? Just get rid of them. It's kind of a cute line. Another note here. Dress is a talent. For Christ's sake, whose property we are, we should seek to make the best of our appearance. What does that mean? Probably something different for just about every one of us. But you're not making the best of your appearance for you. You're making the best of your appearance for Christ's sake. What does that mean? I don't know. You figure it out. You're working for him, not me. Ask him. It's a little thing. He who is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much, and he who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much. So just take care of the little things. They're little. It's not a big deal. Let's go on. But now let's kind of get into the thicker stuff here, of what it takes to understand what's on this test, to get ready for the test, right? the followers of Christ know little of the plots which Satan and his hosts are forming against them. But he who sitteth in the heavens will overrule all these devices for the accomplishment of his deep designs. The Lord permits his people to be subjected to the fiery ordeal of temptation, not because he takes pleasure in their distress and affliction, but because this process is essential to their final victory. He could not, consistently with his own glory, shield them from temptation. For the very object of the trial is to prepare them to resist all the allurements of evil. Now, that's straight out of the book Great Controversy. You've probably read it before. But it raises a lot of questions. What? God is not going to shield his people from temptation? We got a promise for that, right? He can't just dump us, can he? Look at the Bible verse. God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make a way of escape that you may be able to bear it. What was that thing in Great Controversy? He can't shield us from temptation. Well, 1 Corinthians kind of sounds like he's supposed to. What's going on? God keeps his promise. He will never let us be tempted above what we are able. It's just that at the end of time, he's trained us so that we're able to meet all the temptations. That's what the statement said. Let's go back. Right, the bottom, the very object of the trial is to prepare them to resist all the allurements of evil. When God's people are strong enough to resist all the allurements of evil, then God can do what he did in the book of Job, where he says, Satan, you're a witness, just don't kill him. No protection, just don't kill him. And Job passed that test. And God's looking for people to pass that test again. Okay, let's keep going here. So how is God going to do that? Well, he's going to do it like this guy. The guy in the white shirt there. He's a spotter, right? Now, some of you people know a little bit about this game, more than I do. So, bear with me if I say something stupid. But his job is to keep the guy down on the bench from killing himself. And that's a real issue, because it doesn't take a lot of weight to crush your trachea, and then you die. And even if you keep that barbell off of your throat, if it comes down on your chest and rolls down, it can blow out blood vessels, and then you die. So he's there to keep that guy from dying. He's a spotter. So think of it like this. This is just an illustration. You understand that. Satan decides to load 100 kilos of temptation onto you. But Jesus says, no more than 80 right now. And Satan is screaming mad. He says, it ain't fair. You can't, it's interfering. It's just like it stinks. It's just wrong. And Jesus says, the Lord rebuke you. Only 80. Now, Satan loads 80 kilos on, and you start to lift. Now, if you fail, if you don't push as hard as Jesus knows you actually can, he catches the bar so it doesn't kill you. That's called mercy. But if you push with all the faith, and that's really what we're talking about, not biceps. Biceps are cool too, but we're talking faith really, okay? If you push with all the faith that you've got, you can lift 80 kilos. He knows that. He's not just a spotter, he's a trainer. He understands things. And when you lift 80 kilos, in the process, you get a little bit stronger. Somewhere down the road, Satan says, load him up with 100 kilos. And Jesus says, nah, 85. And Satan screams and shouts, and Jesus says, the Lord rebuke you. And we go through the whole process again. And if you don't get it up high enough to get in the bar, you're going to die. Jesus saves you. It's called mercy. If you do, press with all the faith that you've got, you get a little bit stronger. The goal is for his people to resist all the allurements of evil, and they gain strength by, you guessed it, resisting allurements of evil. He keeps them from being tempted too much, but the goal is so there is no too much. Right? Tracking with me? This is not legalism. The whole universe has already seen all they need to see about human beings trying to keep the law by themselves. They've watched that game. That ain't working, okay? This is what we call righteousness by faith. It's doing the right thing, righteousness, by faith in God. Not your own wisdom, not your own strength, by faith in God. When we are no longer divested of all divine strength because of our incorrect knowledge of God, when we no longer go day after day with false attributes kept before the mind as belonging to God, when we regain the faith that Lucifer lost, the faith that he stole from Adam and Eve, the faith that Hebrews 11 tells us made the difference in the lives of all the Bible heroes, then we won't be in an unsaved condition anymore. We will have faith. It's not our strength that lifts the weight. It's the end result of that whole purpose of Jesus' mission to earth, to set men right through the revelation of God. It's the false attributes of God that cause our weakness. It's the accurate revelation of God that sets man right. Now we, Christ's purchased possession, must become soldiers of his cross and conquer in our own behalf, on our own account, through the power and wisdom given us from above. The influence of the cross of Calvary is to vanquish every earthly and spiritual evil power, and we need to know the plan of the battle, that we may work in harmony with Christ. You know, a lot of people would read that statement, and they might say, that's heresy. That's legalism. Conquer in our own behalf. Boy, that's works. And you know, if you focus on those words alone, you know, you could maybe come to that conclusion. But that's not the focus. The focus is down here. The power and wisdom given us from above, the influence of the cross of Calvary. The influence of the cross of Calvary was the whole mission of Christ on earth. It's to show us what God is like. He would die to help you. What more do you want? This idea of overcoming on our own behalf, on our own account, is repeated dozens of times in Ellen White's writings. You can't just brush it aside without, like, kind of basically throwing the whole package in the ditch somewhere. Although Christ gained a priceless victory in behalf of man in overcoming the temptations of Satan in the wilderness, this victory will not benefit man unless he also gains the victory on his own account. Hebrews 11 talks about those who died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth, right? It's the influence of the cross received and exercised, tested, and proved in our own experience. It's our own exercise of free will and the growing strength of faith that allows for that growth. As it grows, it finally becomes the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Right? You've sung the song, right? Faith is the victory. That's what we're talking about. God cannot save man against his will from the power of Satan's artifices. Man must work with his human power, aided by the divine power of Christ, to resist and to conquer at any cost to himself. In short, man must overcome as Christ overcame. And then, through the victory that it is his privilege to gain by the all-powerful name of Jesus, that's not his strength, it's the all-powerful name of Jesus, right? He may become an heir of God and joint heir with Jesus Christ. This could not be the case if Christ alone did all the overcoming. Man must do his part. He must be victor on his own account through the strength and grace that Christ gives him. It's not works righteousness. It's righteousness by faith in Christ. Doing the right thing, righteousness by faith in Christ. Through it all, the goal is to bring us to the point where we can resist all the allurements of evil. And all that's needed for that is the correct knowledge of God to inspire a fully developed faith. Now, the process may be easy to describe, but I'm not going to tell you it's easy to do. The conquest of self is the hardest battle ever fought. But you're not fighting it. It's not self against self. You're calling for the aid of Christ against self. As long as you do that, you'll be okay. Now, Lucifer had a weird problem. In his mind, forgiveness was either easy, speed limit, cop, just give you a warning, or it was impossible. Right? It was either easy, because it was an arbitrary law, or it was an impossibility because it was a non-arbitrary law. With Lucifer's kind of easy forgiveness, the police officer or the judge just, hey, they can just give you one of these, right? You know, get out of jail free, right? That's how Barabbas got out of prison. There was absolutely no justice in that then, and there'd be no justice in it now. It's kind of dumb. In order to understand God's method of refuting Lucifer's claims, we have to understand what Satan was actually claiming. I'm writing these words, it's not a direct quote, but this is the idea. Lucifer says, God, your law is arbitrary, just change it. God says, no, it's not arbitrary, and it can't be changed. So Lucifer says, okay, God, if you can't change your law, that means you can't even ever forgive anyone, because if the law is beyond your control, so is the penalty. Does that make sense? I know I've repeated this a few times, but it's such a different thought than what I grew up with that I think it maybe bears repeating. So Lucifer says that, and God says, well, no, that's not God speaking, but it is God speaking, but it's not what I thought. Yeah, okay. But the reality is that the Lord desires through his people to answer Satan's charges by showing the results of obedience to right principles. Results, that's the language of as in the natural, right? You get results when you plant corn seed, and you put a little fertilizer with it, and you put some water on it, and you pull out the weeds. You get good results when you do the right stuff. The results of obedience. It's not the results of God waving a magic wand or sprinkling fairy dust. It's the results of obedience to right principles. Most of which are little things. That's why he starts with the little things. Satan thought that if he could in any way beguile Adam and Eve to disobedience, God would make some provision whereby they might be pardoned, and then himself and all the fallen angels would be in a fair way to share with them God's mercy. You've seen this before, but I want you to see how Satan just was totally stuck on the idea of arbitrary forgiveness. You've got to change the law. It's easy to change an arbitrary law. Just do it, God. God said, no, it's not easy to change the law because it's not arbitrary. It's based on the distinction between right and wrong, and that ain't ever going to change. Because it doesn't matter if somebody says, murder's okay. No, it's not. You still end up with grieving relatives. It's not okay. It can never be made okay. But Lucifer couldn't wrap his head around it. Like I said, he thought that forgiveness was either easy, arbitrary law, or impossible. He thought he had God, on the horns of the dilemma, as the saying goes. Lucifer couldn't imagine any way to forgive without changing the law. He thought he had God in a box. Those humans you thought it was such a good idea to create, yeah, they sinned, and you can't forgive them. Unless, of course, you decide to be reasonable and change your law. But either way, you lied and I win. He really thought, and remember, in the eyes of much of the universe, Lucifer looked right. I think this was a bigger contest than we understand it to be. This was Lucifer's 1-2 punch, right? It's the only argument he has left. The first 6 are gone. But he's got this 1-2. It's, kind of like the old left hook, right jab combination, right? You come this way, and the guy's spinning his head the other way, and you bam, and you just catch him and give him the whiplash thing and break his neck, and he dies or something. I don't know. Anyhow, it's this 1-2 knockout punch thing. It says either it's arbitrary or it's not, God. I got you either way. What's weird, really caught my attention, is that Lucifer's using this same argument after the close of human probation. Satan declares, will God banish me and my angels from his presence and yet reward those who have been guilty of the same sins? Thou canst not do this, O Lord, in justice. Thy throne will not stand in righteousness and judgment. Justice demands that sentence be pronounced against them. The only reason Satan can make that claim is that even at the close of probation, it hasn't been proven false yet. The claim is still on the table. The evidence isn't fully in because that comes during the test, the time of trouble, time of Jacob's trouble. Paul could see through it. He didn't buy into Lucifer's logic. And by faith, we can believe that Satan is wrong and that God is both just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. These are the things we've been talking about. Faith, just, he upholds the law, doesn't change it, doesn't let somebody off scot-free, but he's still the justifier. He has a way of bringing the word. Do you know what it means to have justified text? on your word processor. Justified means the right edge is nice and smooth. Okay? The word literally means to bring to the mark. And so you stretch that line of type so it ends on the same spot as all the others, okay? He is the justifier. He brings us up to the mark. How does he do that? Like that guy with the white t-shirt, you know? He's a trainer. He's a spotter. He keeps us from killing ourselves. But his goal is to get his people to the point where he can show the results of right principles. What are the right principles? Love God, love everybody else. That's it. It's pretty simple. Okay. It's the justifier part of that verse that poses the real challenge. To make a sinner justified, to heal him of the disease of sin, isn't an easy task. The very first thing you have to do is reestablish faith in God, because sin is a deficiency disease. And then you have to grow that faith. That's why God gave them the sacrificial service. That's why we also have the example of Christ in his whole mission on earth, was to show us what the Father was like so we would trust him. But to completely refute Satan's claim, the faith of God's people must be strengthened until sinners are fully healed. Unlike Satan's idea, it's easy or it's impossible. God's plan is possible, but difficult and costly. With this approach, nothing is arbitrary. It's real, like nature. Cause and effect kind of a thing. But the whole process is complicated by our failure to understand what God is trying to do. So let's take one more quick look, only 2 more slides. The penalty of transgressing the law has fallen upon our substitute and surety, and for a time has been suspended, so that the guilty do not feel its weight. But the object of this suspension is not to teach us that its claims are over, its exactions set aside, but to attract us to holiness, to obedience. Nothing is changed except the manner of bringing men to obey the law. Obey its claims, we must. This is a remarkable statement. Now, Ellen White paints both pictures, both the judicial, because there's value in that. It's easy to understand, it's easy to feel forgiven. But back behind it, there's the healing picture as well. This one is all healing. The penalty has fallen upon our substitute, and for a time has been suspended. Why suspended? Well, so the guilty do not feel its weight. If I'm feeling guilty, if I'm feeling condemned, I don't have faith in God. He's the guy that is threatening me. He's the guy that I made him mad, and now he's mad, and he's going to kill me. I can't have faith when I'm feeling crushed by guilt. And so the penalty is suspended so that I don't feel that way. So I know that God still loves me. I can confess my sin, yes. I can still feel, a certain level of guilt and realize, man, I blew it. But I can confess that sin, and I can be confident of forgiveness. That's where the judicial aspect comes in, because that's real easy for us to picture and to understand. So I'm confident in forgiveness. There is now therefore no more condemnation, right? I can feel good about God. But this object of the suspension is not to teach us that its claims are over, its exactions set aside, but to attract us to holiness. Now I can see God. I can look at God. I can have an understanding of what his character is really like. And it draws us. If I am lifted up, I will draw all men unto us. When you see God and you recognize goodness all the way through, you realize how cheap it is to be selfish. And you say, I don't want to be like that. I want to be like God. The purpose of the suspension is so the guilty do not feel its weight. Faith cannot grow in an atmosphere of conscious guilt, which is why this is an essential step. There is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. But this is also only the first step. Relieved of their guilt, believers then begin the process of therapy, the process of exercise, the process of building that muscle of faith. And that continues right up to the close of probation. And I'm going to sound a little heretical here, but we'll cover this tomorrow or the next day. I'm not sure which. That process continues even after the close of probation. But we'll talk about that later.